Welcome back to a special edition of Capital Talk, coming to you from the Crown Plaza in Upper Hill. All this week, some very important VIPs in town, ex-presidents we call them, but not just any ordinary ex-presidents, folks, ones who are still working. Imagine, in their 70s and 80s, still working. Why? Because there's still work to be done. Just like my guest today from 95 to 05, President of the Republic of Tanzania, and now, folks, part of the champions for an HIV-free generation. Sit back, folks. Former Tanzanian President and former journalist, I might add, Benjamin Mkapa. I like to throw that part in, Mr. President, because not many people know that.
I see.
Not many people know that, but that's why all your speeches were perfect speeches.
Well, I tried to frame them in such a way that the journalists it would be easy for the journalists to pick up the main issues I was raising. Yes.
In other words,
I did try.
Yeah, not getting lost in the stories.
No. Yes.
Mr. President, the question I've been asking your colleagues, and you guys are part of this preeminent group as part of the champions. You're still working, Mr. President, in your 70s. You could have retired, you could have been on a farm, you could have been living, a life of retirement, but you all choose to keep working. Why?
Well, in the first place, as we say, we may have retired, but we are not tired. What we have retired from is active politics. But we have not said we are not going to put in our share of energies in solving our country's problems, our regional's problems. And among those problems or challenges which we face is, of course, HIV/AIDS. It is a serious threat to the survival of our nations, to the aspiration for integration. It's also a challenge to our economic development. So when I was approached by President Mohamed to join this group, I said, I will find time. And that's what we are doing now.
And when you do this, when you go out on the road, when you get in a plane going to a different country, Mr. President, do you get tired? Do you get frustrated? Or are you positive that this battle against HIV and AIDS will be won in the end?
I am driven by the necessity of victory in this war. Therefore, I am convinced that if we pull our energies together, we can win this war against AIDS. As your president said some years ago, when the momentum to fight this war was really very high. In Swahili, he said, pamoja tuangamize HIV/AIDS. And I understand it was on the mouth of all the leadership in this country. That's an expression of not only hope, but clear determination to be part of that arsenal against the war in AIDS. And so I don't get discouraged. And particularly when I get to a country such as yours, where I find there is not only understanding of the seriousness of the problem, but also the mechanisms for tackling it, the strategies that have been evolved, the organization, the people involved, including volunteers, community volunteers, and the network of delivery centers, whether it is advice, counsel, care and treatment. When I see that network and the spirit and the ardor with which the problem is being confronted, I get truly encouraged. Truly encouraged.
Yeah. And when you look around, Mr. President, because you were in places like Kibera the last few days, you visited deep inside Kibera. Did you come out saying, oh my goodness, what are we doing here?
It was a little disconcerting because there's no doubt there is extreme poverty there. It's overpopulation, and you can see the poverty. But also when we went to this school and HIV/AIDS center, we met volunteers, all kinds of community volunteers in society, churchmen, as advisors, counselors, circumcisers, and youth groups, women's groups, people living with AIDS, children having HIV/AIDS, and how they were being counseled, how they were finding a new hope, and others being integrated in the work and economic activities of the country. So this concept started waning gradually. It increased the hope that it can be done. But what I hope is that it can give momentum to the national effort to have a better living environment in our modern cities. It requires good planning, but also a proper allocation of correctional methods in terms of habitation.
Absolutely. Speaking of hope, Mr. President, you were here 2007, 2008, part of Kofi Annan's African Eminent Personalities. You were here when Kenya had sunk to its lowest of lows, and you have come back 5 years later. Do you see a change, Mr. President? Do you see that, have we learned lessons from that dark past?
I am inclined to think that the lessons have been learned, yes. To be truthful, we were happy that the process of forming a political governance framework for the country was concluded. But we kept wondering whether the program now of implementation would work out as well as it did. Yeah. And I am really overjoyed that it has worked. It's not that without pitfalls, no, but the fact that we are able to overcome those pitfalls and put a constitution in place, an implementation process which is now almost nearing its end, is extremely inspiring. So it gives me hope that the next time round, it will not just be a miracle. It will be the result of people's deliberate efforts to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
What about the fact that there's still some people, still elements out there, Mr. President, who are still preaching division? They're still preaching this division, Mr. President, like they want to go back to 07, 08.
In a world like ours, you will never have a society without sinners, whether they are political sins or social sins or religious sins. So there will always be some discordant notes. But I really am impressed that even for those who you might describe as power hungry, they are watching their words very carefully sometimes. And for this reason, I believe that the reform process will energize a free, fair, and acceptable campaign as well as voting and results. Yeah. I am quite confident, yes.
When you came in 07, 08, Mr. President, were you as shocked as the rest of Kenyans? Because Kenya had been such a peaceful place for decades, and then all of a sudden, boom. Were you as shocked as the rest of us?
We were very shocked indeed. We were very shocked indeed. We interpreted your immense economic progress because you're a middle economic power. We interpret that as being also commensurate with great political awareness and understanding. So when this eruption happened, we said, hey, we did not quite read the signs very well. I was particularly saddened when we visited some of the people who had been misplaced in the IPPs. Yes. And it fell to my lot to express to them the hope of neighbors that it would be sorted out, that the national leaders were working hard to correct the injustices and imbalances that had forced them to flee and so on. It was saddening, very saddening indeed. And that's why I say I hope it doesn't happen again. Yeah. Yes, it does happen.
Yeah. And Tanzania has come a long way too, Mr. President. I mean, you guys have like this system in place. 10 years, 10 years, 10 years, and the country moves on. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Yes, indeed. You know what our founding president said when we tried to make him go on and on and on? Eventually he said, listen, if you have this concept of periodicity in governance, and 10 years is enough, then even those with the highest ambitions to replace you can take time. They can take their time. They will not resort to force because they are confident that at the end you will move aside and they will have another chance. Yes. So that's one of the reasons why I think. But ambitious people, they are there. They are there in abundance. And although our next elections are 2015, but already people are laying the ground for self-promotion.
And if Mwalimu was to wake up today, let's just say theoretically, if he was to get up from his grave and look around the continent, would he be impressed? Would he be disappointed? Would he want to go back where he is?
That's a tough one. No, he would be, I think, delighted that the unity of the country remains, that we are not too inward looking. In fact, that we are making some progress in reaching out to our neighbors by way of the East African Community integration process. He would be delighted that the the reform of economic policies is being undertaken circumspectly. He would be a little, I think, surprised by the element of localism in the politics now in the country. You know, we were one party state for a long time. When we went multi-party, then local feelings started fanning the concepts that the multi-partyism means very many parties. And having been in a one-party system for a long time, it's very difficult to evolve political parties that have fundamental differences in philosophy, but also in the economic goals for the country. Very difficult. So when that then happens, they all fall back onto personalities. Who is who? I think that would surprise him a little bit, because we have quite a bit of it.
Sure.
Yes.
What about the Pan-Africanism? Would he be happy with things around the continent in general? Because they were part of that Pan-African movement, remember?
Yes, I think on that front he will probably be a little disappointed, because now I may be interpreting my own reaction, but I should think he would expect that we would be standing up to our former colonizers and really the economic powers of the North, standing up to them much more seriously and practically than we are doing. I sense a certain degree of either intimidation or a natural subservience, particularly on tackling the regional political or regional as well as internal political questions. We are ceding too much authority and voice to our former colonial masters or their allies. That, I think, would disappoint him. And on the economic front, I don't think we are fighting sufficiently for the ownership of natural resources, which they are obviously pining for, the developed countries. I think on that front he would want us to be a little more energetic, a little more assertive with regard to ownership of our natural resources and the terms upon which we are going to exchange them with the developed world.
Because let's face it, Africa is the last frontier, isn't it?
Exactly. Now we are flattered by saying that because of this immensity of natural resources and because of the huge youth population that is manifesting itself, that we are going to constitute the model of the future of this century of economic development. I don't think that immensity of numbers and immensity of natural resources necessarily equal development for the people. Correct. Or becoming a center of gravity.
But your friend President Mbeki once said the 21st century belongs to Africa. You agree?
It can be Africa's. But I really do believe that we must be more assertive and more articulate about who we are, what we deserve, and assert ourselves on the international plane. That's what I believe is.
And still at 74, you're still optimistic, you're still hopeful, Mr. President. You still have that drive to get up every morning and make a change for Africa?
Certainly, because of my journalistic background, I look for every opportunity to make that assertion that Africa is a place that is worth taking into account, and that we must make it necessary for the rest of the world to take notice of us.
Mr. President, brilliant stuff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure
well
to be
done.
with
Good
you.
to see you. Don't go away yet. Former Tanzanian President Benjamin Mkapa, folks, former journalist. Listen to the man speak. Even after he left office in 2005, folks, look at him. 7 years later, still working, getting up every day, because he knows there's still work to be done on the continent. Right now, he's part of this group calling itself Champions for an HIV-free generation, fighting the battle against AIDS at every front in every capital, no matter the age, folks. And if they can do it in the 70s and 80s, who are we to complain? We have no excuse. What a guest, what a show, folks, what a week it's turning out to be. We're at the Crown Plaza in Upper Hill, and we're bringing you stories from people who were there from the beginning. That's why you should listen up more and more, because you cannot find guests like former Tanzanian President Benjamin Mkapa anywhere else but right here on the bench at the Crown Plaza in Upper Hill on the award-winning station, K24, where we are, yes indeed, even in times of, what was that you said, tunangamiza?
Pamoja tuangamize HIV AIDS.
Even in times of pamoja tuangamize HIV and AIDS, we are still all African.
All the time.
all the time. God be with you. Peace be unto you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. This edition of Capital Talk has been recorded at the Crown Plaza, Upper Hill, Nairobi.